going to see a globe that says interpretation. If you click on it, you can select your language of preference. If you're joining us from a mobile device, such as a computer, such as a phone or a tablet, please look for the three dots that say more. That's where you're going to find language interpretation. If you click on it, you'll be able to select your language, and then you need to make sure you click done so that it can start working for you. And now I'm going to give the same instructions in Spanish. Buenas noches y bienvenidos. Tenemos interpretación al español disponible hoy. Para los que deseen utilizarla, si están conectados desde sus computadoras, por favor vean en la parte de abajo de la pantalla, va a aparecer, hay un globito que dice interpretación, como un globo terráqueo. Si hacen clic ahí, pueden seleccionar su idioma de preferencia. Y si nos están acompañando desde un dispositivo móvil como un teléfono o una tableta, necesitan ir a los tres puntitos que dicen más. Ahí van a encontrar interpretación de idiomas, pueden hacer su elección de idioma y hay que presionar en listo o done para que funcione. Y si tienen cualquier problema con la interpretación, por favor, nos dicen en el chat. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much, Adrian. I'm ready to be made interpreter.
Thank you very much, and welcome everyone to the community meeting for the implementation phase of Walter E. Long Metropolitan Park. I'm going to start off with a couple of introductions on the city side. My name is Ray Hernandez. I'm the project manager for the City of Austin Parks and Recreation Department. And also with us this evening is James Mendez. He is the Transportation Public Works Department project manager that's assisting PARD. Our consultants this evening who are leading the effort in the implementation phase. Next slide, please.
One second.
Okay. There we go. Our consultants that are leading this effort is Rialto Studio, their landscape architecture firm.
Sorry, Ray.
Yes, sir. Is everything okay?
Momentito.
Okay.
Adrian and Ray, can you hear me?
Yes.
Somehow the interpretation channels are switched. So for everybody, if you chose English, then it may be switched.
Can we continue or do we need to wait a little longer?
Should I end the interpretation and should we start over?
Let's try it real quick. Okay. Okay, try English now.
Okay, welcome everyone. So
I can hear you now. It was only playing Spanish on my English channel. So I think it's okay now.
Okay, great. So thank you for...
Yes, let's test the Spanish one very quickly.
Okay.
Apologies, everyone.
So as I was saying, the lead design firm that's working on this project is Rialto Studio, their landscape architects. And that is being led by Robert Deegan and with assistance by Edith Uresti and Suzanne Weiss. I hope I pronounced that correctly. The architecture team is CasaBella Architects, and we do have Sarah Marson, who's going to be doing a short presentation on the restroom facility. Our civil engineers is Civilitude Engineers and Planners, and we also have a cost estimating team of HECM. And just to remind everyone, the purpose of this meeting is to update the community on the implementation of the vision plan for the Walter E. Long Metropolitan Park, and this is for phase one. I do understand that there's some concerns about the boat ramp. I understand that it's not operable or that you cannot launch your boats. But I want you all to know that this is to resolve that concern, that is a cross-department effort, and that includes Austin Energy, Austin Water Utility, and PARD. And this meeting specifically will just focus on the phase one implementation. Next slide. So starting with the vision plan, just to give you a little bit of a history and background. The department started on the vision plan process for Walter E. Long back in December of 2017. There were 4 primary phases in that process, and that was the inventory analysis phase, framework and preliminary plan phase, the vision plan phase, and then the review and adoption phase. Real quickly, the inventory analysis phase, for example, provided the data that looked into the site context, the utility infrastructure that was existing. It looked at zoning, it looked at vegetation, hydrology, soils, topography, and history. With all of that data, we then moved into the framework and preliminary plan development. And so we looked at developing the program for this park site. We started to develop concept plans, and eventually we came up with a preliminary vision plan. And essentially, we did come up with 4 framework plans that I'll show you in a little bit. The next phase, which was phase 3, was the vision plan development. So we drafted a final vision plan, and that final vision plan was taken to the Parks and Recreation Board for recommendation for adoption by the City Council. And the last phase was review of that draft vision plan and adoption by council. And that happened in October of 2020. Now, this whole process took about 3 years to complete. So it was quite a lengthy process. Next slide, please. Throughout the vision plan process, public engagement was very key to the success of the project. For example, just to point this out, that the public engagement was a primary focus of the development of the vision plan. And in that process, in the public engagement process, we looked at creating public surveys, holding stakeholder meetings, and having intercept surveys. So our first stakeholder meeting was held on April 4th of 2018. And then our last stakeholder meeting was held on April 12th of 2019. So all of this input was used to create the framework and the preliminary plan that eventually created the vision plan. Next slide, please. So here are the 4 framework plans that were developed, and all based on the input that we received and the data that was collected through the vision plan process. Framework 1, which is concept 1, contained most of the elements that are now included in the vision plan. And so that plan was adopted by council on October 15th of 2020. And the adoption of the vision plan is intended to provide the Parks and Recreation Department a blueprint for the future development of the park. And just to give you an example of the area that we're talking about, Walter E. Long has approximately 2,530 acres of parkland. The next park that's closest to the size in acres is Roy G. Guerrero, and that's 395 acres. Following that is Zilker Metropolitan Park, and that's 350 acres. So to give you a good perspective, we're looking at a park size that's about 6 times the size of Roy G. Guerrero. Next slide, please. The image that you see here is the vision plan that was adopted by council. And the area in red that's circled is the area where the implementation, or phase 1, is going to be focused on. The dark outline is actually the area 2 that was indicated in the vision plan as the phase as the first phase of implementation for the vision plan. This area that we're talking about, specifically the phase 2 area, is about 272 acres. The implementation plan is going to be looking roughly at about half of that acreage, so about 172 acres. Back in 2019 to 2020, when the estimate was put out for the vision plan, specifically for this phase, or I should say for phase 2, area 2, the estimated cost for implementation was between $140 and $160 million. So that's quite a bit of a budget. Next slide. The phase one implementation overview. The task that I am tasked to do as a project manager for the project is to implement several goals, and this has been communicated to our design team. Essentially, what we're trying to do is we're going to try and provide a functional restroom facility within this phase one area. We are also going to look at enhancing utilities so that we can take into account any future development. We are going to improve the existing park roads and provide ADA access as a goal. And then we're also going to provide a nature trail. And if budget allows, we would like to include a new playground. Next slide. So the timeline to achieve the goals that I just mentioned, we start off with the preliminary phase, and there are essentially 5 phases into implementation of phase one. The first phase is the preliminary phase, and we started that back in January 2023, and that ended roughly in May of 2023. We are now currently in the design phase, and we began that phase in June of 2023, and we anticipate to complete that phase in January 2024. The next phases, which is design development, construction documents, the permitting phase, and the construction start phase, those phases we anticipate to start early 2024, and hopefully we will be under construction for phase one in late 2025. Next slide, please. Project funding. So at the moment, we do have funding available for construction, and that is at $3.7 million. We do recognize and acknowledge that the improvements that we are wanting to implement exceed our current available funding. We are here today to ask the community to help us identify priorities of items that we would like to include as for the improvements. And we are also looking into additional funding opportunities such that may be had through the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. They do offer a matching grant, so we're looking into that. And just to give you a little bit of a context of the costs associated with some of the improvements that we're proposing, the paving and the utility improvements alone are estimated to take about 80% of our available construction budget. So that's a hefty amount. Next slide, please. So with the budget that we do have, we do anticipate to provide a couple of park elements. And those are providing access and parking. And that would include accessible parking, meaning ADA parking. And also to improve some of the existing park elements, such as providing drinking fountains, picnic tables, and such. We do want to improve the existing restroom facility and the utilities associated with that. That existing restroom facilities functions off of a, oh no, I can't remember what it's called, a leach field. So it's not hooked up. Thank you, Robert, septic system. We do intend to improve park roads, and we hope to improve some select picnic areas and add some drinking fountains. And we do hope to include a nature trail. Next slide, please. So part of the meeting today, we are going to ask you for some feedback in terms of prioritizing some of the potential upgrades. And so we will be asking for your input on upgrading the existing and providing new picnic facilities. There is going to be a question about character and placemaking improvements. We also want to get your input on a playground, an inclusive playground, and a nature-based play playground. And we are also wanting to know of your interests in terms of a priority on trees and landscape enhancements throughout the park site. And that covers my section of the presentation. And I'll turn this over now to Robert Deegan from Rialto Studio. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. And thank you all for being here tonight. So I think Ray did a good job of giving you a broad overview of kind of the nuts and bolts of what we're doing. I'm going to try to paint some pictures for you to help you understand what that means on the ground, and what we're actually proposing to do in physical terms on the site. Before I move on to the next slide, I just want to hang on this slide for just a minute and just remind you to pay attention to these 5 categories as we review the presentation, and think about how important they are to you and to your priorities for how this park gets improved, because that we're going to come back to this slide at the end of this presentation and ask you to provide some input on how to prioritize these. Before we jump into park improvements, I want to give you a little bit of context for what's on the ground there today. The vision plan laid out a broad and quite bold vision for this area of the park, but it also looked at the park from kind of a bird's eye view. And our job as we get into implementation is to zoom down on the individual sites that we are implementing and get a better understanding of what's on the ground, which, as you'll see, can lead to some shuffling of elements and shifting of things around to make it fit the site a little bit better at the scale that we're working at now. So one of the first things we notice when we look at the site, of course, is the lake on the north boundary, and you can see offset from the lake the floodplain and the waterway setback. You can see the area along the lake is largely steeply sloped, and the area highlighted in green here is largely open and relatively flat. As we layer in vegetation, we start to see a pattern emerge. The pink towards the bottom and left is the heavily forested areas of the site. These are essentially undeveloped areas, but you can also see the western half of the site has a lot more trees, larger trees, higher quality trees than the eastern portion of the site. The lighter sort of greener colors represent higher quality trees. The size of the circle represents size of the trees. Generally speaking, this area right on the west half of the site has a lot of the best trees on the site, with another nice cluster right here in the center. There's also some good riparian vegetation along the edge of the lake, the wetland vegetation that forms a barrier between the developed park and the lake, with a few areas, mostly on the east side, where there is no riparian vegetation and where most of the swimming and lake use access occurs today.
Robert, pardon me.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you could go a little more slowly for the interpretation. Thanks.
Okay, I will do my best. I'm sorry, I'm a bit of a fast talker at times. We also wanted to look at the existing paving on the site. This map here gives you a broad overview of how we assess the condition of the existing paving. The legend says good, fair, and poor. I think those are generous terms. I would call it more like decent, bad, and awful. But the light purple area in the middle that is the main entry drive and the main parking area is usable, functional pavement. The roads stretching out to either side are primarily starting to deteriorate and are in pretty poor condition. Much of the parking in many sections, especially of the Western Road, are completely deteriorated and beginning to fall apart. So we were able to identify that a lot of this pavement needs to be upgraded or removed. We also noted the condition of the bollards throughout the site, which you can see in some of these images to the bottom left. Many of those are also beginning to break or fall apart. Many of them are also strung together with cables with white PVC pipes strung between them that make for a fairly unsightly and cluttered way to control the landscape, and also make it very difficult for pedestrians to move freely through the landscape because of those cable barriers. We also took a good look at the improvements on the site that exist today. There's an existing control booth here at the entry. There are 2 picnic pavilions highlighted in kind of a teal color. There's the existing restroom building in yellow, which is completely non-functioning today. And then in orange dots, you'll see the site is generally well appointed with portable toilets that are scattered throughout the site. Again, they are fairly unsightly in their current condition, but they are relatively available throughout the site. You also see there are picnic tables scattered throughout the site, all in widely varying condition. Most of them shown in purple are just standard movable picnic tables, most of which are nearing the end of their useful life. The pink ones represent more heavy-duty permanent picnic tables and grill areas, some of which are still a little more functional. The Parks Department did an accessibility assessment of these facilities as well, and tried to look at what on the site is accessible today, and found that relatively little of it is. You can see that a couple of the portable toilet units are accessible. Other than that, there is very limited accessible parking, one accessible trash receptacle, and none of the picnic facilities are currently ADA accessible on the site. So this is one of the major goals of this phase 1 implementation, is to address the issue of accessibility on the site and greatly broaden the range of amenities and experiences on the site that are accessible. So with that context, I want to take you into the implementation plan that we'll be presenting here today. This is an illustrative plan of the site as it will appear after phase 1 implementation is complete. But this illustrative plan, as I go through it, will also include all of the elements that we would like to provide, that we want you to vote on towards the end and provide your priorities for. So this implementation plan includes both the basic infrastructure that is currently funded and some additional improvements, some of which we have not identified funding for yet, but we want your help in prioritizing what we can provide in this phase 1 implementation. And we obviously want to make sure we're planning for future phases as we move through. So as you can see, and this is the farthest out view I'll have before we zoom in. So I do want to point out the brown lines in the bottom right, which represent the nature trail system that will be implemented with this phase of development to provide access to that large wooded area to the southeast of our site. Zooming in on the core of the site, which is the area with the circulation system, want to first address the paving that is being preserved and the paving that is being removed. So the light purple in the middle, again, represents the existing paving that is in acceptable condition. This phase is not going to attempt to address or repave that area. We're going to accept that area as acceptable paving today and focus our funds on areas where the paving is in greater need of upgrading. The darker purple represents the areas where we're proposing to remove the pavement entirely and convert it to landscape space. The areas you see in the bottom left, many of those are already abandoned or largely abandoned and starting to be taken over by grass and vegetation. So we'll just be finishing the job there, as well as simplifying access to the maintenance facility that you can see located kind of central to the site here. Oops. On the right side, we're proposing to remove the loop road that loops down close to the lake and pull vehicular traffic back up out of the waterway setback and the floodplain and convert that to a pedestrian path, which is in keeping with the nature of the vision plan. We also, looking ahead to the vision plan, wanted to just be thoughtful about how some of the major elements of the vision plan will fit into the improvements that we're implementing now with phase 1. So this slide demonstrates how these elements fit into this plan long-term. The dashed purple line that you see represents the proposed alignment for the primary road through the park. The vision plan envisions eventually pulling that road further away from the lake to really give the open green space over to pedestrians and park users and pull vehicular traffic further away. This phase doesn't have the budget to implement that new roadway alignment, but we did want to consider it in how we were locating various elements, with the plan and intent being that the roadway improvements implemented in this phase can be given over to pedestrian circulation when the long-term roadway is implemented. We're also showing how ball courts and soccer fields can fit into the plan with both the existing roadway preserved and this new roadway. The vision plan shows most of those facilities over here on the west side. As I mentioned earlier in my presentation, the west side is heavily treed with some of the best vegetation and also more steeply sloped. So we've relocated those facilities to areas of the site that are more fitting for them. We're also showing the future central lawn and plaza area would still occur in the area encircled in orange. The future marina would still occur in the area encircled in blue. So these elements from the vision plan still fit neatly within the park after this phase of implementation. I do want to reiterate that this slide is being shown only to show how we are planning for these future elements. The soccer fields and the ball courts and the other elements are not contemplated as part of phase 1 implementation. This slide, I think, does a really good job of showing you where that 80% of our budget needs to go that Ray mentioned earlier. This is the infrastructure improvement that is the foundation of this project and really will form the foundation of this section of the park for many years to come. So these are the major improvements that are going in. The blue line represents a new water system that will bring a water line into the site and then distribute that water to drinking fountain locations and maintenance hose bibs and the new restroom building. The green represents the septic field that will serve that new restroom building. The existing building there was also served by a septic field, but that field is no longer functional. So we'll be implementing a new septic field to replace it. We did investigate bringing in offsite wastewater, but found that to be infeasible at this time. The orange represents new pavement, vehicular pavement throughout the site. This is largely going to be placed over existing vehicular pavement. So we'll be reusing materials and base and recompacting and reusing materials as much as possible. And the yellow represents parking areas throughout the site. We've endeavored to account for the number of parking spaces existing on the site today and replace that number of parking spaces with this redevelopment so that there's no reduction in parking, just an sincere improvement in the quality of that parking. Next, I'd like to zoom in on various parts of the park and talk in a little more detail about the various improvements that we are proposing there. Again, keeping in mind that this is an overview of the improvements we would like to build, but not all of these improvements are funded. So this is where the priorities we're asking for are going to come into play. Right now, we're on the western half of the park. You can see in the bottom left corner a key map that shows you which part of the overall park plan we are zoomed in on. So you can follow that to help keep yourself oriented. This is the loop that exists on the western end of the park, again, where we have lots of large trees. In many ways, this is one of the more pleasant parts of the park to occupy today. The loop road would be restored with parking throughout. And then really 3 new picnic areas are being provided in this area, only 2 of which you can see in this view. So at the far west end would be a new picnic area, drinking fountain, and supporting parking. This is a really quiet, secluded part of the park that I think provides a really great destination at the far west end. And then here, at more the right side of the screen, you see another picnic area down close to the water in this open green field. That area would be connected back to an area here more central to this loop where we would like to consolidate portable toilets into a screening structure that would still provide ventilation, but also shade and some organization and screening for those facilities, as well as a drinking fountain and accessible paths connecting everything, including an accessible path extending to the south here, which connects to the 3rd picnic facility in this part of the park, which we will see in a different view. You can also see the existing maintenance building in this view and maintenance yard that would be preserved. This is where PARD runs their operations for the park from and would continue to do so. Oh, we went the wrong way. I'm not sure why. Flipping over to the east end of the park, the improvements on the east end consist of a 2-way in and out roadway with a roundabout located at the end, a new accessible path to the existing picnic pavilion near that roundabout. trailheads located on both the right and left side of this stretch of roadway that provide access to the nature trails that I mentioned on a previous slide that will wind through the wooded area to the southeast of our site. The removed roadway that currently parallels the lake here would be replaced by an accessible path that also provides access to a waterside picnic area near one of the current access places where people tend to fish and bathe. And that those beaches are generally stabilized by cypress trees. Throughout these illustrations, you'll see the bright green trees and the dark green trees. The dark green trees are existing and the bright green are additional trees that we're proposing throughout the park. Again, one of the things to factor into your prioritization. Finally, as we move to the center of the park, here we're back at the entry roadway, control booth, and that primary intersection of the existing Blue Bluff Road and the new park road that we're improving. Here on the left of this, again, you can see the maintenance building and you can see the other picnic area on the west side of the site. This is really home to some of the best trees on the site and some pretty decent quality existing picnic facilities that will be enhanced and provided with an accessible route to access. This is really one of the best shady tree covered areas on the site, and removing the existing roadways in this area of the site will also serve to enhance the user experience in that area of the site. Throughout the site, you see these dots aligning the roadways. This is the bollards, the replacement of the bollards that exist there today. What we're proposing to do there, as illustrated in this visualization here, is to utilize the existing bollards in place and harvest components of bollards from areas that are being removed to create a new bollard system with tight enough spacing that cabling or wires are not required between the bollards to prevent vehicular access, and people can move freely between them. By utilizing bollards in different sizes and patterns and heights, we can create a playful alignment of bollards along the roadways that also adds distinctive character to the park. Here in the corner of the center of the park, we have the core of the improvements that we are hoping to propose here as part of this park, including a new accessible path to the existing picnic pavilion down at the south end here. The new restroom building, which is the existing restroom building, being restored and expanded to provide expanded capacity of functional restrooms on the site. And of course, the play area, which you see is this large area just north of the road. The play area is being located here for adjacency to the restrooms, for access to some large existing trees that can provide natural shade for that play area, and then good access to surrounding picnic areas existing and proposed. It will also have great adjacency to the future event lawn when that is developed in the area that is currently parking. The plan for the play area right now is to locate the inclusive play area at the top, level with the existing roadway and highly accessible, and then wrap that with nature play along a line of existing trees that can take advantage of slope heading down towards the water. No additional design work has been completed for the play area. This is highly conceptual at this point, and if the play area is funded and within budget, we'll be going back to the community to get additional input on the design of the play area. The components of the play area, nope, one more slide before I get to that. This slide just gives you a brief overview of the accessible features that we are proposing to add to the park with full implementation of these current plans. So those include the all-inclusive playground here at the center, 3 restroom facilities, the primary restored existing restroom facility, and then the 2 porta potty enclosures on either end. Multiple picnic facilities throughout the site, including the existing pavilions and several new picnic facilities. Restrooms, parking areas, and trash receptacles throughout the site would also be accessible, as well as the new trailheads. So a significant increase and improvement in the number of accessible facilities provided at Walter E. Long Park. We mentioned the play areas previously. I just wanted to expound a little bit about what the 2 different play areas represent. An all-inclusive playground is a playground designed for universal use that meets the needs of the cognitive, emotional, and physical needs of the entire population that it serves. So this is a playground that is designed to serve all of the different, both children and families, their parents that might use that facility. This is a playground designed to provide excitement and interest and play value for a very wide variety of children and families using it. Nature play is defined as a space designated area for all ages and abilities, encouraging a creative and unstructured play while exploring natural materials. The Parks Department has been implementing nature play in more and more of their parks and seeing great returns using natural wood and stone and different ways for children to interact with the natural environment in a playful, safe, and inclusive space. At this point, I want to turn it over to Sarah with CasaBella Architects to give you a brief overview of what's proposed for the existing restroom building at the site and how we would be restoring and expanding that facility. Sarah, you're muted. She may be having trouble unmuting. Does she have permission to unmute?
I think we got it now.
Sorry about that. You should be able to unmute now. Sorry about that, Sarah.
No worries. Thank you, Robert. Still, what beautiful images. I am already excited and want to be there. I'm with CasaBella Architects, and we're designing the restrooms for this project. We explored designing a new restroom facility. However, we can reuse the existing structure by proposing to remove the interior walls and the fixtures. And you can see that in the demo floor plan with the yellow or red dashed lines. We plan to infill the existing door openings with the same style brick and color of the current structure. For the overall aesthetics of this restroom, we plan to match the existing materials and natural elements of the park. The design intent is for a multi-use restroom, which provides an ADA family restroom and 5 standard water closets and stalls. And it includes a communal sink and metal gates for security after park closing. We would also like to add a new water fountain on that north side, and a bottle filler station and a foot washing area for public use. To maintain the ventilation inside the restrooms, the ceiling will be open to the roof structure, and that's shown in that top image where the roof and the walls are open to each other for just that natural ventilation. And all the doors will have an opening at the top and bottom. We'd also like to include exterior and interior lighting for visibility and security. And then on this left side of that top image, there is a proposed addition to the existing structure. We would just like to blend that in, but also provide existing plumbing fixture or new plumbing fixtures that would double the count. Thank you all for your time, and look forward to your feedback.
Thank you, Sarah. Just to finish up here, a couple of images of the park as envisioned with these improvements implemented. Here you can see a bird's eye view looking from west to east along the upgraded park road with the new playground facility kind of center top of your screen, and the new restroom just to the right of that. New ADA paths and picnic areas visible. And as well as just large open green spaces unobstructed by additional roadways allowing access down to the lake. And a little closer view of the playground with the lake beyond and the restroom facility on the left. This also illustrates what we're proposing for the roadway and parking throughout the site, with the parking primarily being pervious or gravel parking to reduce our stormwater footprint on the site, and the main driveways and accessible spaces being paved, and then bollards used between parking and wheel stops used at parking spaces to restrict access to the remainder of the park for vehicles. So with that, I'm going to slide back to that same question we asked earlier and ask you to please tell us how you would prioritize potential park upgrades within this context. As Ray mentioned earlier, the infrastructure of roads and parking and water, and there's also some electrical and other upgrades that are necessary, is kind of baked into what we are set out to do, as are the nature trails and the restroom facility. So what we're asking for is your priority among the remaining major components. So upgrading existing and providing new picnic facilities throughout the park, character and placemaking improvements like the portable restroom enclosures and bollards, the all-inclusive playground, the nature-based playground, and then trees and landscape enhancements throughout the park. And I believe Adrian is going to post a poll for you to respond to provide your preferences on these. And just take these in the order that they're printed on the screen here.
All right, it looks like we have a 6 out of 12. So we're looking for about 10 people. If you're unable to complete the poll, if you're able to put your priorities in the chat, then we'll be able to see those in the chat. Right, we're seeing first priorities, an upgrade in existing and provide new picnic facilities. And that is shared with character and placemaking improvements, as well as trees and landscape enhancements as top priorities. All right, looks like we're holding steady at 6. And then thank you, Steve, for sharing in the chat. If anybody else is unable to use the poll, if you would put your priorities in the chat, that would be helpful. All right, and we see Suzanne offering some helpful tips. She's saying to try scrolling down to the 5th question, and then it will let you submit. All right, looks like we are now up to 8, and then we have Steve's in the chat, so I think we are good to proceed, Robert.
Well, at this point, I would just like to just review next steps. So Ray went over the schedule earlier. We're looking to start design development and construction documents at the beginning of next year. So the first step to beginning that is to establish exactly what our budget and scope of work is going to be. So we're going to take the input from this meeting and establish and whatever additional funding is available, if any, and establish a final scope for these phase one improvements, and then we'll be able to begin design development and construction documents for those. As we move through that process, we will be having additional opportunities for engagement. That's especially true if the playground ends up as a funded component. And then you can see here a web address or a QR code for the project website where you can always find up-to-date information. So with that, I think we'd like to open it up to any questions which you can submit through the chat, and we will do our best to provide you a response.
Thank you, Robert.
If you, I see a couple of chat, some questions. Also, if you are unable to enter in the chat, if you use the reactions button or raise your hand button, then we can call on you in the order of raising your hand.
So to respond, the first question I see is, where would the parking be for the planned marina in this area? Would the marina include ramp for motorized boats? So the marina, the new marina is not within the scope of our improvements right now. So we haven't done any meaningful design work on that component. The vision plan envisions the new marina to be at the west end of this. Let me see if I can get back to a plan view. So the vision plan envisions the marina to occur in this area of the park. So that area doesn't have significant improvements in this phase, especially long term. So my anticipation is that when a marina is funded and built, it would be either sited here or in this area here. In the short term or interim, the existing parking area and boat ramps that exist would remain functional. So that's what will provide boating access after phase one is implemented. And then long-term marina construction will be part of a separate project. And then there's a second question, would there still be porta potties down near the ramp? And I believe the answer to that is yes, that those would remain in place down there for this phase of implementation. Ray, the next question is, who do we contact for information about the boat ramp issues?
Yes, you can go ahead and reach out to me. I would be able to then forward your contact info to the individual in our department who's working closely with Austin Energy and Austin Water Utility to respond to your question.
The next question is, how many miles of nature trail are proposed? While we don't have a detailed layout yet, we do have a quantity of nature trails in our budget estimates. I sharing my screen, so I will have a hard time pulling that up, but if I could get Edith or Suzanne to take a quick look and see if they can find that information. Can't hear you, Suzanne, but you can put it in the chat. Thank you.
So it looks like there's 3 miles of nature trails proposed.
I think that's all the questions that have been submitted so far. Please feel free to submit additional questions if you have them, or to raise your hand and we can unmute you.
I'm not seeing any more questions or any raised hands so far, but we can give it another minute. I just want to take this opportunity to thank everyone again for coming. And here's another question. On the restroom design, is the open air design at the top standard practice? Wondering about insects.
I can address that, Robert. The city has a good history of designing restrooms that are open, meaning that they're not enclosed or conditioned. And one of the things that we do is we do put up screens in the openings to help with the bugs. So it's something that we've been able to manage quite well.
Will there be recycling receptacles? Yes, everywhere there is a waste receptacle. It will include both trash and recycling.
Yes.
There is another question. Rachel says, I may have missed this, but wondering if the bollards are coming out or being replaced in phase 1.
So the intention and proposal right now is to remove the bollards that are in poor condition, retain the bollards that are located in an area where they're useful, but remove the cables that string between them, and then reuse existing bollards to fill gaps and allow for the bollards to serve their function, which is to restrict vehicles from accessing parts of the park where they're not intended to go, but to no longer obstruct pedestrian access through the park. And we believe also with good design to provide a much more pleasant aesthetic experience with a playful arrangement of the bollards. And there was
I believe there was another question here. Will entry fees have to be increased to fund this? I believe that there is no consideration at this time to increase the fees to enter the park. I'm not sure if that's even considered for the future, but at this point, there is no planned increase to fund this.
well, and you may want to address how it is being funded because it's not really tied to fees.
True. So some of the funding that's coming for this project is from the I believe 2018 Parks Bond that was voted on by the voters. And then the fees that have been collected over the years are also contributing to the funding for this particular project. We also have some PLD funding that's included, and that's parkland dedication fees. So the dollars that are coming to do this implementation are coming from numerous sources so that we can hopefully achieve the implementation.
Yeah, and they're not tied to future fee collection.
No, they're not. No.
It looks like there's another question with regards to the boat ramps. Some of the questions when if it's on a new comment, sometimes it gets accordioned and folded up. So forgive us if we're missing it. So Bill is saying, would you please answer Steve's question about whether there will continue to be boat ramps when the marina is built?
So we'll follow the vision plan as closely as possible. And then in addition to that, there will be a community engagement process that'll happen with any new design or any kind of future work that's going to be implemented. I'm not a boater, but I have been to marinas, and I do believe that marinas do include boat ramps. So the likelihood of a boat ramp being included with the new marina is, I would say, is pretty high.
And not looking at it right now, but I'm fairly certain that it is included in the vision plan as part of that marina.
Does the vision plan include details for the marina?
No, it does not. It is at a pretty high level. As Ray mentioned earlier, this park is thousands of acres, and so a vision plan that seeks to encompass the entire park, doesn't get much beyond here's about where the marina will be and what it needs to do, but not a lot of detail about how exactly it will function.
So in a comment in the vision plan, I was unsure if the marina was just for canoes and kayaks.
I do not believe that is the case. We were not the authors of the vision plan. We've obviously reviewed the vision plan in some detail, but because the marina is not part of this phase, I haven't spent a lot of time in that component, so I can't answer that question with utter confidence right now. But I do not believe that's the case.
Yeah, and then any future plans that the Parks Department will develop in regards to the proposed marina or even the existing marina that's there, their existing boat ramp and access to the water, that will include a engagement process. So if anything is being proposed, we will be reaching out to the community. And in general, the Parks Department would certainly include any and all kind of boating access that we can provide. So that would include canoes and kayaks in addition to boats.
I see a comment. The lake is in the top 5 fishing lakes in Texas, so we anglers are very concerned. I can appreciate that concern. This lake is a beautiful lake. I've been fishing there myself. It's a really special place. So we appreciate y'all coming out tonight. I'm looking through, and I believe I've unaccordioned every comment, and I don't think we've missed any comment or question. So Robert, do you mind going to the end of the presentation where we have the next steps again and the project webpage for this project? And just want to encourage everyone to make sure they're familiar with this webpage, and we will post updates to next steps as we move through the next few months and have new information, and we will be reaching out to you with any updates, and feel free to email us. Ray shared his email, the project webpage, and we're here to answer your questions. And if there's unanswered questions that you need to send through email, we can develop a Q&A or FAQ for the future.
Yes, thank you, Adrian.
Thanks for coming. That concludes our meeting.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. You all have a good evening. Thank you for all your work on this.